Wake Up MLS here today to react, man. We've had already a number of reactions videos. Just this past week alone, the MLS offseason transfer activity is popping, bro. It is absolutely going off. We got two friends of the show here at Goals TV today. I'll team up with a great intro in just 1 second. Before we get there, guys, you're not going to want to miss this breakdown. You're not going to want to miss any breakdown that's coming in the future. Do me a favor. Like the video down below, subscribe to Goals TV for more MLS content weekly. The 2025 season is right around the corner. You're not going to want to miss any of it, okay? And look, you've seen them here before. If you're not new to MLS, Wake Up MLS, sorry, and this show, this channel, you'll recognize the two gentlemen on your screen before you. La Cuna Galaxiana is here to help me break down these transfers, this transfer activity. This last 48 hours has been immense for the LA Galaxy. We got Ananda and Rob from La Cuna Galaxiana again to help me break all this down. Boys, it's been a crazy 48 hours, man, right? You guys, as champions of this league, are moving, right? I'm glad we waited a couple extra days to have this video, because if we hadn't, I would have been probably a little disappointed, right? We missed out on a couple key moves. Let's talk about them. We got to start from the very beginning, though. And to me, this might be the most controversial one of all, right? The outgoing transfer of Jalen Neal. The Neal deal, man, I don't care who starts, Rob, Ananda, when this deal came through, and Rob, maybe just, again, with the work that you do, right, with the Galaxy and whatnot, and how you cover the team, you might have got some inklings of this beforehand, right? So I kind of want to, maybe we'll start with you, Rob, just kind of work our way to Ananda. When the rumor started coming out that Neal might move on, what were your thoughts, just considering what we know about the Galaxy's back line, how it is an aging back line to an extent, right? And a young, promising defender moving on to another side in MLS.
To be honest, no inklings whatsoever. I woke up to the news. For whatever reason, I woke up a little late that morning, and I woke up to a couple people sending me text messages to see if it was actually real. And I quickly, jumped on and did some research, and yeah, found that it was very, very shortly thereafter. I'm talking like 2 or 3 minutes. We got the official press release from the Galaxy giving us news about the deal, and just as surprised as everyone else was. This initially was a move that not only hit me on the footballing side, but on the personal side. We at La Cuna Galaxiana have had a chance to interview Jalen Neal on the podcast. He was actually my second LA Galaxy player interview when I started covering the team 3 or 4 years ago. Gotten a chance to meet his lovely family, and not even just on the footballing side, who's a player that has a huge upside, but a fine person as well, always doing work in his community. So it hit hard, not going to lie. I mean, try very hard as a journalist to stay neutral, but this one was actually one that I got on my feels about.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think back to when you guys won it, there was that video that MLS posted on the timeline where he's like emotional, and like you could just tell like what it means to him, right? To be representing that badge, those colors as you lift MLS Cup. And it's just like it all with the drop of a hat. Now it's like, all right, I mean, all those emotions baked into it. He now has to move on. And me as an outsider, I'm trying to process how I felt about this, right? If it was my own team, again, not giving away, it was a trade, right? You got something in return, but still moving on, who you expected to be a key piece of your side for years to come, someone that you could look forward to be the stable rock back there. Ananda, when the news first broke, what was your initial reaction to all of this?
I actually tweeted, and you guys can check on Ananda Galaxiana. You guys can always, I always say follow, block me, or stalk me there. I said gutted. That was the first word that I texted Rob. I texted Rob in the morning when I caught it, and I hit him up and I said, man, did you see Jalen's news? Gutted. And that's all I said. And I didn't say a word till much after that, until, we started preparing for the show and having to talk about it. So, and I think that's the way a lot of Galaxy fans felt, Jose. Rob used a really good turn of phrase. He said, "Es desde la cuna as it gets." I mean, this kid was part of the academy since, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but like from the age of 10 years old. Yeah, exactly. So he gets it. He is as desde la cuna as it gets. He gets what it means to represent the shirt because he's lived it and breathed it. Not only that, but, he comes from a family of Galaxy supporters. So he's been, grown up in this environment. And I think one of the fairy tales that a lot of fans gravitate to, whether you're a fan of a team in MLS or the Premier League or La Liga, is those homegrown players, Jose. We have a special emotional attachment to those players, and it's almost like that underdog story, right?
Yeah.
I think it's that narrative that we always emotionally are attached to as fans. As an Arsenal fan, I have an emotional attachment with Jack Wilshere. He's an academy product, right? So it's those things, and that's what I liken it to here with Jalen Neal. And so I think everyone is gutted and devastated. And so when I was preparing for the show, having to talk about this, that the emotional cord strings was the first thing that we had to talk about. And then I had to make sense of it on paper, because I immediately said, this deal doesn't make sense, right? Like you said, I thought we were investing in this kid as the bedrock of our center back partnership moving forward. And in fact, there was a lot of Galaxy fans, Jose, that thought Neal and Marcus Furcrenis, who we sold last year, was going to be the bedrock of this Galaxy team moving forward. But it unfortunately wasn't to be. I think the one thing I'll say, and maybe this might spur a thought from you guys, I think the injury played a huge part in the narrative of Jalen Neal. And unfortunately, he ended up being a casualty of that unfortunate incident.
Yeah. I think it did have something to play into it for sure. Just the thought process for the front office standpoint, right?
Correct.
The risk involved, right, with coming back from injury like that. Is he ever going to be able to reach the level that we knew he could reach before? And then you think about, right, defending the title. That's still going to be a priority and objective going into 2025. And frankly, we all know on the attacking front, you have more than enough tools to get that done. It's just the back line. And so the biggest question I go to, and maybe, Rob, Ananda, you guys can help me out, just understanding this piece. If the future of your backline was Jalen Neal and he moves on, right? And we're going to talk about the Zanka deal and kind of what that means for the backline as well. But where's the future of this backline now, right? Is this another retooling that we're going to have to see in 2026 and beyond, right? Like, what happens to some of these aging pieces that you have there don't hold up as well in 2025 as they did in 2024? Right. And of course, again, the business is not done. There can still be opportunities to level things up. But where does the team go next? I guess long term are they only thinking short term as a front office right now with these moves?
It's funny because we actually posed that question on Lacuna Galaxiana. We asked our listeners, does the Galaxy sacrifice winning in the future or laying that foundation for the future to win now? And to answer your question, there really is no like for like replacement for Jalen Neal. Like Ananda said, this is Lacuna as he gets. He's straight from the academy. I mean, he takes off your homegrown, just under the contract mechanism. He takes off your homegrown. I mean, he's not counting that much against the cap. I mean, he was only making 175K. So there's really not a like for like. And if you go to the VCFC roster, who's Galaxy 2 or like the Galaxy second team, there's really not a defender there that I see that's ready to jump into the back line as a center back and take up minutes that Jalen Neal was taking up, even though they were not starter minutes at the end of the season. And now that I mentioned they weren't starter minutes, I think that's the injury that you guys mentioned, plus the fact that he wasn't starting towards the end of the year are the big things that are kind of leading to this deal here. He did let us know that the injury was a very, very trying time for him. Probably the most difficult season that he's had, he told us. And on the flip side, he did lose his starting spot to Amiro Garces, and Amiro Garces showed the Galaxy coaches that was his position, and it was his to lose. So he came in, he took Jalen Neal's starting spot, and from there it was, kind of one of these things where you're saying, okay, well, this center back has to develop, but he's not going to get minutes as this team is currently constructed. So what do? He's in the last year of his contract, and then you are going to have to give him some money, right? Because like Ananda mentioned, he's a U.S. international. He has a lot of upside. He's been scouted by teams in Europe. So the feeling is that he's going to be a good player, but the Galaxy already had their center back pairing kind of set in stone here. So really, you're saying like why did this happen? You're not understanding why this happened. The injury, him losing his starting spot, and the fact that the Galaxy are still under pressure. I was going to say we're under pressure, are still under pressure to get their salary cap under the 5.95 million that all the teams need to be in. That happened because obviously Gabriel Pecci and Dejan Jovic both aged out of that U22 initiative. A source from the Galaxy used the word they graduated out of that program. Well, their graduation means that the Galaxy is now scrambling for funds, and one of the ways that they were able to come up with the necessary funds to bolster the team was through a sale like Jalen Neal.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair, right? I mean, again, we can all kind of look at just what the formula for success was in 2024. And while we all kind of point to some of the gaps, right? Defensively, set pieces kind of sometimes being an issue, things like that, your attack was second to none. And it almost created, if I had to compare it to a team in Europe, right? That Barcelona Hansi Flick effect, where it's not a matter of stopping goals. It's can we just simply outscore every opponent that we go up against? And it makes for such entertaining soccer, right? In general, right? Just being able to tune into that as a neutral. And I think that's going to be the game plan this year again, right? Even though there are defensive pieces being added. But again, man, it's just, again, for emotional reasons or just for the pure logic of losing a very promising youngster who could have been the rock in that back line for years to come. I'm just curious now to see how this pans out for Neal. I hope, right? And I'm sure you guys too. Wish him all the success, right? With his new side, his new badge. Yeah, of course. But I mean, again, it feels like a gut punch. It really kind of does.
Jose, I wanted to add one last point on this before we move on, which is I think we've got to think about it. One thing we haven't talked about is what does this look like from the player side, right? If you're Jalen Neal, you're looking at, Rob just touched on it, you're looking at that center back rotation, you're saying, I'm not getting in there at the moment with the way things stand, right? And if I'm trying to break into the national team, Montreal looks like a place where I am going to get starters minutes. I am going to be the starting center back. Top of that, Kevin Baxter from the LA Times reported that Montreal, Jose, has a very good pipeline to Italian side Bologna. So if he's looking for that European pipeline, that's something that I'm sure the player and his agent, they're looking at as well. Of course, I'm sure the Galaxy also have their European pipelines, but it looks like that one between Montreal and Bologna are very, very strong. So I think the one thing we got to think about is, what's the player looking at? And maybe on his side, he had that conversation with the front office, and perhaps he agreed to the move to say, hey, this is what's going to be best to launch my career from this point on.
Yeah. And there is that logical side of the argument too, right? He's just doing what's best for him in his career. Of course, he's got caps to the U.S. men's national team, so it's just a matter of can he build on that and really get that to where he wants it to be considered a staple for that side. Yeah, again, it's just when you see youngsters move on who just show a lot of promise, it just you always ask what
it hurts.
Yeah. And it's just I feel like we're gonna keep asking that throughout the season, especially if some of these veteran pieces that we're gonna talk about, for whatever reason, aren't up to snuff when you think about what this backline could be. So with that said, I do want to jump into who we think, and again, he's not a direct replacement to Jalen Neal, but we can't ignore the last 48 hours and how eventful it's been for Galaxy fans, right? I want you guys to talk to me a little bit about Zanka, right? And what this means as a veteran piece being added to this back line when you've just shipped out a promising young defender. Just to answer the question right off the bat, either one of you can give this to me, but is he, let's just answer it now, is he a direct replacement in your eyes for Jalen Neal?
No. Neither one of us believe he is. I mean, we're both pretty unanimous on the fact that he is the replacement for Martin Cáceres, who the Galaxy decided not to bring back. Cáceres had European experience at the highest level, won titles there. Same thing with Zanka Jorgensen. I mean, he has 5 Danish Cups and 5 leagues in Denmark as well. So this guy is a guy who knows how to win. He was a bedrock of those defenses that won leagues there in Denmark. So no. Galaxy fans that are worried that you're losing a promising center back, a young promising center back, and replacing him with Mateusz Jorgensen. Not really the case. You're really replacing Martin Cáceres here.
Gotcha. Okay. So with that said, right, are we going into this season with Zanka now just thinking, okay, like I feel pretty good about this back line. What's the expectation from your side as fans, right? Like, does anything change for you mentally knowing this is kind of the direction you're going now?
I think this signing. Well, one thing is the front office is doing their job with replacing Jose. I couldn't say the same about the front office previous to Will Kuntz, right? In terms
Yeah,
of getting
fair
us roster ready and doing what's satisfactory and what's needed, which is replacing what you've lost. We're going to talk about a player that potentially is going to replace Gaston Brugman, who we lost as well, and that we had to, for salary cap reasons. And in this particular case, we are replacing a guy who left the team and who was a really, really good servant to the Galaxy, not only on the pitch, but off the pitch. And Rob talked about his experience. So I think looking at this back line, what's interesting, Jose, and any Galaxy fans or just MLS fans that are listening to this, go ahead and put this in the comments as well. I posed the question to Rob. Do you think that this back line downgraded from last year? If you think about who we had last year with Jalen Neal in that center back rotation, and now you're replacing that Jalen Neal and a Martin Cáceres, of course, he got injured halfway through the season, versus now, which we don't have those two players, and we've replaced them really only with Zanka, right? I mean, you could argue that is a worse off back line than it was last year. So I think that is the interesting question. And so I think right now my answer is it's probably a slightly worse back line than it was last year. But of course, I can't pass full judgment until the transfer window is fully closed, right? To see if we add any more pieces. I know Rob's been reporting on a young Ecuadorian, highly touted Ecuadorian center back, Diogo Bagui from Emelec. That's out there right now. Nothing hot, but that is a rumor that's been linked to the LA Galaxy. So again, I'm not going to pass full judgment until I see the full picture. But as of right now, I think we are slightly worse.
Yeah, fair enough. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, I agree. I mean, truth be told, I haven't seen a lot out of Zanka, right? But he is 34, and we do have scouting reports from him from his time in Belgium, from Anderlecht fans who aren't too happy with his play, and claim that for a player of his experience and a player that's played in big leagues, that he's prone to too many errors, and that he arrived in Belgium not really ready to try. Thinking that his experience would kind of carry him through. Now, again, that's what they're telling us from Belgium. We haven't seen him here. We haven't seen him in the locker room. We also have heard from those same scouting reports in Belgium that he's a good leader in the locker room, and as well that he's good going forward. He likes to get into the attack. But yeah, I really do think that on paper anyway, the back line is a little worse off. I mean, last year it was Zavaleta, Yoshida, Neal, and
Garces.
I'm missing one another. Who's and Garces, right? And this year you're going to have Maya, Zanka, Garces, and Zavaleta. So yeah, I think on paper you're slightly downgrading.
Yeah, fair enough. But with that said, right, we can't forget about the other signing as well that you guys have made, right? And technically that is a backline signing if you think about it, right?
Right.
This whole deal, right, with Marcinkowski, and like just I'm curious how you guys see this with McCarthy, right? And I mean, maybe iron sharpens iron. Competition always breeds improvement. We can always make that argument. Is this a signing, just kind of pivoting into the other signing that's again made the rounds in the last 48 hours, as this being a way to kind of just, again, whether it's through competition or anything else, level up the back line, knowing that you've just moved some pretty key pieces around defensively?
Nana, you want to go first?
I was going to say, I think this one was a shocker to me, Jose. We've made 2 keeper signings in the last 2 years, right? Which is really interesting. I don't know what it says about sort of the direction that we want to go with the defensive line and the goalkeeping department, or maybe there is just a lack somewhere that's noticed either by the front office or by Greg Vanney themselves. I'm sure they have these internal conversations, between Mikkel Denscher, who's our new technical director, who, by the way, did work with Zanka in Copenhagen. So that's another sort of connection there, Jose, which kind of makes sense a little bit of it all. But look, I think what's interesting about this is that, you talked about competition, but man, like I wonder if this is again to kind of ruffle the feathers of a McCarthy and a Novak Mitrovic, but also I think about the way Greg Vanney wants to play Vanney ball, right? He likes keepers that potentially can play with their feet. And he likes progressing out of the back from the goalkeeping percentage. One thing that John McCarthy is not very good at, Jose, which you look at the underlying stats from FBref, he's not a good distributor of the ball. That's never been his strong suit, but he's a very good shot stopper. So I'm wondering if Greg Vanney's trying to add another dynamic to this team, similar to Mitrovic in the profile of a ball-playing goalkeeper. If you look at Marcinkowski's stats, his long pass or long ball completion percentage is much higher than McCarthy's, right? And the other thing I'm going to say about this too is I wonder, Jose, if this is a market opportunity. What do I mean by that? Remember, Marcinkowski was a guy that was injured. He tore his ACL in the middle of the 2023 season, and he was injured through all of last year. Now, we don't have the financials of this deal, but I'm wondering if Will Kuntz is looking at it and saying, maybe we can get him on the cheap. He looks like a promising goalkeeper with the stats that we've seen before that. And I'm wondering if we're getting him as a market opportunity because other teams are not going to take the risk, right, with a guy like this. So those are things that I'm trying to put myself in the front office issues. Maybe those are the things that they're thinking about.
Yeah, and another thing I'm thinking about too, just kind of hearing you talk about that market opportunity specifically. I agree, right? A free agent signing that offers some veteran leadership from the back, that offers you a different element to how you play coming out of the back line could be interesting when you think about all of the games the Galaxy will have this coming season. It's going to be a big, big year for Galaxy fans, right? Multiple competitions. You just think about just what that will do. And we all saw what happened to teams like the Columbus Crew last season, just trying to juggle that very hectic, very congested schedule. And it does impact you, right? At not just how they exited the playoffs, which I think surprised many, but the middle of the season when they couldn't really find a way to get out of 4th, 5th, and 6th, right? It was just kind of they had to sacrifice maybe, certain regular season games or results to stay alive in certain competitions and make everything worthwhile for the fans. And so there's some of that I'm sure at play too. But I do agree with you, Anand. I think this was a good market opportunity to maybe, again, sharpen everyone, right? Specifically when it comes to McCarthy and the rest of the goalkeeping staff. But beyond that, just an opportunity to shake things up, keep things fresh, because there's a massive target on your back coming into the 2025 season as defending champion. So to me, it's not a needle mover, but I do think it just makes things very, very interesting. And I feel like there's still no one's resting on their laurels in that front office. It looks like they're still trying to keep things fresh, everybody on their toes, because we know how big of a season's coming up ahead for the Galaxy, right? And with that said, man, as much as these two deals with veterans coming in are ones that I think fans should take note of, the one that I'm really trying to learn as much as I possibly can, because I want to know what he'll bring to this team, right? We kind of all heard the rumors already. Lucas Sanabria being close, right, to getting a deal done. I want to get your take on what you guys think he will bring to this side, because that's a big deal. What was it, $5 million in terms of the financials of it being done?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a big investment. So what is he expected to bring to this defending champion LA Galaxy side? We'll start with Rob first.
Jose, just like you said, it's a reported 5 million, reported 1.8 add-ons. This deal does look to be done. Nacional vice president has gone on record and said, it's done, and the fee was agreed. He is touted in Uruguay as a defensive midfielder, but he's known as a volante mixto, which really, when you break down the stats and I nerded out one day and I became a Nanda and I got down into the nitty gritty of the stats. To put it for Galaxy fans, he's a hybrid Gaston / Mark. I mean, he gives you the qualities of Mark Delgado that can advance the ball and go box to box, but he has very, very good positional awareness, and he's a defensive midfielder first and a box to box midfielder second. He's gone on record and said that he models his game after his compatriot Manu Ugarte, the Manchester United defensive midfielder, and he indeed plays not second fiddle, but he plays behind Ugarte in the pecking order in the Uruguayan national team. So he's learning from that defensive midfielder that he grew up kind of idolizing. So from the player himself, he feels more as a defensive midfielder, but his skill set is such that if you want him to play that box-to-box midfielder and advance the ball for you, he can. He gets into the box late. He can score a goal. He could pick out a pass, as evidenced by his stat line last year. I believe it was 5 goals, 6 assists. So if you need him to play that defensive midfielder in the double pivot, which Nacional likes to do, he can do it. If you need him to play in the midfielder more as a box-to-box midfielder, he can do that as well. With Edwin Cedillo being the fantastic number 6 that the Galaxy had this year, I don't really think that they need Sanabria to be that defensive midfielder. I'm seeing him playing just ahead of Cerrillo, or maybe in that double pivot where they both have a little bit of liberty to roam if you know they've kind of meshed at that point. But with Ricky Puig being out for a large part of the season, I think this gives them a little bit of an offensive lift against teams where they need it, and then against teams where they need it as well. Allows him to play in that double pivot with Edwin Cedillo where he's really comfortable. This is a good pickup. I mean, the player's 21 years old. Ananda talked about the Galaxy trying to bring in players that were not only good players but good men as well. By all intents and purposes, he's another nice Christian lad with a young family, and he likes reading his Bible and staying at home with his family, which is great because that means he's going to be, concentrating on his football and, giving his everything to the Galaxy. So as a 21-year-old for 5 million, teams that have been looking at him in Europe as well, he was being looked at by a European team. I can't remember which one it was at the moment, Ananda, if you can remember. Benfica, that's who it was. Benfica was looking at him. They were in contract negotiations with Benfica as well. So the fact that he chose the Galaxy over Benfica and that European route and getting this player at his age with his talent and the upside, nice coup for Will Kuntz.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that little piece you mentioned about complementing the midfield that we know is, from my perspective, right, fantastic. The pieces that are there, right, and how they operate in that midfield today. Cedillo, I think what this could do, and Ananda, stop me if I'm wrong here. I feel like Cedillo still has an opportunity to take a massive step up in his game. I think he's a fantastic passer of the ball. Obviously, I'm a massive fan. This kid grew up like an hour plus away from me here in Texas. So
yeah, thanks, Jose.
Yeah,
thanks for Cedillo.
yeah,
Hell of a player.
It's crazy, man. Right? Like the fact that we were willing to give him up for in order to bring in other key pieces that we have now. But we talked about what that means with guys like Jalen Neal. That's a player that I'm a big fan of, and so I think he could take a step up in his game. I think he could be a tried and true 8, even progress up a little bit. We saw so many times where Ricky Puig was coming so deep to get the ball, right, and still had to cover so much ground to create opportunities for that amazing front three you guys have. So, Ananda, from your perspective, is this that opportunity? Do you get now in Sanabria this Ugarte-like destroyer who can kind of hold things down in the middle of the park, so Cedillo is able to get more freedom to get a little more involved, and therefore, when Puig is able to come back, right, be a little more of a tried and true 10, which we all know he can be. Is that how you see this?
What's interesting, Jose, when you were kind of narrating through that, I thought about the MLS Cup final and maybe a blueprint or a foresight into how Greg Vanney might approach next season or certain oppositions moving forward. So what I mean by that is Rob was a brujo because he called Gaston Brugman being in that midfield while everyone else was calling for Marco Reus and Diego Fagundes, right? Yeah. And maybe from that game, he learned a lot about his team and how he wants to operate this midfield, especially in certain matches. Remember, Jose, we are playing multiple competitions next year. We are playing a continental competition, with teams from outside MLS, Liga MX teams, right? That those cup games are going to be very physical. They're usually cagey, tight matches, and we need players. I mean, this guy is perfect because he's played in the Copa Libertadores, so he has experience in those type of cagey matches in really, really rough environments, right? So that's one thing to consider. But the other thing to consider is just, I think the MLS Cup final gave Greg an idea of maybe I can do or compose this midfield sort of like more workman-like and have three workhorses that have really good passing range. You remember on that first goal, the way it was set up to JP was a 1-2 played between Gaston Brugman and Edwin Cerrillo, and then Gaston Brugman with a peach of a slide rule pass to Joseph Paintsil. And I think, so going back to your point around Cerrillo, maybe Cerrillo is the guy that puts a slide rule pass. Maybe Sanabria is the guy that puts that slide rule pass. Maybe Sean Davis, who we haven't talked about yet, is the guy that's going to win the tackle back in midfield and just give a simple ball to one of his forwards, or sorry, one of his midfielders like a Cerrillo or Marc Delgado, and they'll put in that slide rule pass. So I want to say that I've been thinking about this a lot. I feel like the MLS Cup final is sort of giving Greg the confidence to say, maybe this is the way I want to play my midfield, especially without the talents of Ricky Puig. Let's face it, you're not going to replace Ricky Puig. You're not going to find a like for him. And you're not going to depend on Marco Royce at his age playing 90 minutes, game in and game out. So you've got to approach this a different way. And maybe the signing of Sanabria is a sign of things to come of how Greg wants to play moving forward in that midfield.
Yeah, it very well could be, right? And I think at a minimum, what it gives you is a number of different looks and opportunities, depending on the opposition. And that's something that, again, right, if you talk about an opposition's preparation for the matchups that they'll have against the Galaxy, if Vanny can throw a number of different looks, keep teams on their toes, and just really not give them any sort of playbook to how in terms of how to approach them, right, tactically, because you just have so many different combinations of midfielders that you could throw at any given opposition. What team wouldn't want to be in that position? I think at a minimum, that's what Sanabria gives you, right? And so when you look at players that have to step up, you're right. No one's a like for Ricky Puig. You're not going to go find that player in the market. So it's just a matter of how do you make these pieces work to at least replicate the production? Because we know that once that ball crosses into that attacking third, these guys know what to do with it, right? They know how to create chaos, notch in goals. And that's where I think it's going to be a signing that feels like, regardless of what his actual production or output ends up being, as far as Sanabria goes, I'm going to be looking at kind of the impact that he has on other players around him, how they end up stepping up, and what that ends up contributing to the attacking prowess moving forward. So with that in mind, right, I know, Ananda, you did send in, or you kind of throw it in there, right, the lineup for what this will look like, right? I do want to bring that up. I think it's going to be interesting to set the table for 2025 and how we think about expectations, okay? Because that's something that I want to talk to you guys about too, right? You look at expectations for this team going into 2025. What is it, right? What is that expectation going into this season? With this new lineup, right? I'll get that pulled up in here in a second, but I'll start with Rob on this one. We kind of know what this lineup now is going to probably look like, right? So how do we feel, and what's the expectation? Can we successfully defend that 2024 title that we just brought in?
I have said it a couple times already. I don't think so. I might get hate from LA Galaxy fans. I might get canceled, but it's extremely hard to do, especially without one of your best producers in Ricky Puig, right? You might, at the earliest, you're getting him back in August or maybe July, right? And that's if everything goes swimmingly. You're in 4 competitions. We've already mentioned that. Possibly 5 if the Galaxy do end up participating in the US Open Cup, but at the very least 4. So how do you, and you mentioned that this was a problem for Columbus, how do you keep this team afloat in all the competitions based on the signings that you have at the moment? I don't see it being there yet, but of course the window's not done. I don't think they repeat as MLS Cup champions because of Puig's absence, but I do think they win a trophy of some kind in one of these competitions that they're in. The most likely one for me is either the Campeones Cup, which is that one-off against the Mexican champion, or the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is going to be harder, but they have a pretty good draw. Could have a pretty decent path to at least the semifinal, and after that you just gotta win 1 or 2 games to get that cup up in the air. So to answer your question, no, they don't successfully defend this title, but they do pick up other pieces of silverware along the way.
Sure. And Ananda, from your perspective, right, kind of looking at this lineup now and just what we think could really happen, right? Do you kind of echo Rob's sentiment, or maybe are you just leaving the door open for what could come, just knowing what business has already been done, regardless of some of the rumors that may be floating out there.
Yeah, I'm lock and step with Rob, and I think he mentioned it. The biggest factor, Jose, is the loss of Ricky Puig. A big meter or a big factor of success in this league is DP utilization, and the fact that you're one DP, you're arguably your best DP, your MVP of the team, is not going to be there for 2/3 of the season. That is a huge, huge loss, and we just talked about it just a second ago. You can't replace that type of talent, right? So I think that is the biggest unknown, and the other thing that we haven't really said or talked about either is how is he going to come back from that ACL, Jose? Especially with the way he swivels, his body swerves, right? The way he plays ball. I mean, he needs two really good knees, man. So, I see his Instagram and TikTok stories. He's working hard. He's, in the middle of rehab. He's, with his family in Barcelona, etc. But that is a huge variable. So unless we have better visibility into that, I can't confidently say that we're going to repeat. I even made the way too early prediction, Jose, that I'm not even sure we're a top 4 team the way we are, because you've seen, because it's mostly around the idea of fixture congestion and the fact that we don't have Ricky Puig. I remember Maya played all 34 games last year. I don't think he's going to do that again this year. I mean, in a 38-year-old body, taking that kind of pounding on top of the fact that he has to fly. 37. He will probably turn 38 this year, but on top of, the flying schedule, Jose, because he's not going to have to fly within the US, which is already, changing time zones, etc. We're going to have to play overseas in other countries as well, in these other cup competitions with these midweek games. So that is not going to be friendly to guys like Zanka, guys like Yoshida. So I expect there to be a few injuries along the way. I mean, we've seen the impact of what that does to teams, Columbus Crew, LAFC. We've seen the impact of what those continental competitions do. And I think for those reasons, I think we're going to struggle in the beginning and middle parts of the season. We might have a resurgence like Seattle did last year and get into that top 4. But as of right now, we're going to be fighting for that top 4 seed. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's fair.
Asterisk.
Yeah. And so one thing I'll add to that, Rob, before I'll let you chime in. But one thing I think that it also points to it that we didn't talk about was just all the transfer business being conducted elsewhere, right?
Right.
The West is kind of leveling up when you really look at what's happening right now in the market. I didn't even it's kind of crazy to even say this, right? But the fact that the Quakes may come in and just shake some things up dramatically with all the signings they've made, championship pedigree at the coach level.
Damn it, Bruce.
Big Bruce, man. I just think you look at this and it's just like there are other extraneous factors that we have to take into account. I won't concede that Galaxy aren't right now a top 2 team still in the West. I still fully believe they are. I think through the course of the season there will be hurdles to overcome. Don't get me wrong, but I still believe that with what the pieces that you plan to add, what's already been confirmed in the market, losing Puig is big. I will not concede that, but it's still at the same time, right? There's so much talent on paper here that I fully expect Galaxy to still come back with the vengeance and expect, whether that actually happens or not, expect to defend their title. Rob, what were we going to chime in with?
Yeah, I was just going to say asterisk to your question, your previous question. I will say the Galaxy aren't done. They are limited on funds and limited on resources. However, they do have a little bit to play with. Will Kuntz is going to maximize every little bit of everything that the Galaxy have to play with. Like you mentioned, I mean, other teams have had a great transfer window, San Jose being the really, really big one. But the Galaxy didn't bring in Gabriel Pecci or Joseph Painstill until the latter stages of the CVI, which is the Coachella Valley Invitational, super, super close to the season actually starting. So I have every confidence that they're not done. Plus, with the new MLS mechanism here, financial mechanisms in which you can pay cash for 2 players and then sell 2 players for cash as well. It'll be interesting to see what they're able to do with that mechanism there. Will they go out and get a player in the league for cash and in that way try to replace Ricky Puig's production, or will they sell a player to another team in the league for cash, so then they can go out and flip that money and fortify the team elsewhere? Like I said, I don't think they're done as they're currently constructed, though. Nah, if they stand on business where they're at, they're not they're not going to repeat.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We'll definitely see, right? The way I wanted to kind of wrap up this show, because I think there's still potentially an opportunity. There's rumors that swirl. We never really know, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective. Is there one more big player exit for the Galaxy to make room, right? To reinforce maybe in some key areas. And then you also have to deal with rumors like, of course, right? Guys like Gabby Peck who are just attracting attention from Europe, from all over the place, right? Is there one more big exit here? We'll start with Ananda that you guys foresee, or do we feel like the big pieces that we had in place as a Galaxy fan are there and they're locked in?
The one player that has been bandied around in the Galaxy, sphere forums, and I don't want to see this personally because I think he had a fantastic season, but that I think is on the cards is Dejan Joveljic, man. Dejan Joveljic, I think the big thing here is that he is quote unquote graduating, as Rob said, a source, verified this for us. He is graduating out of his U22 slot, which means now we have to pay him his full salary of what he's owed, which his salary hit for, well, this was up until 2025, is almost 700,000, Jose, 683,750. That's huge. Now, I don't know if his exit is going to be a necessity just out of having to confirm with salary cap rules, or if it's actually a choice. Look, if it was my choice, I would not sell him. I mean, he is a guy, he's a potential 20 goal a year scorer or season scorer, right? He showed that last season. Think about this, guys. He scored the game-winning goal in the Western Conference Final and the MLS Cup Final. He's a big game player. So if you're asking me, do I want to see him go? Absolutely not. But could he be a casualty just based off salary cap rules? Absolutely. And the fact that he's graduated out of his U22 slot. So that's an interesting one to watch, guys.
For sure. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. We've brought it up a couple times as well. I mean, the Galaxy are trying to stay under that cap, and the casualty, if not Dejan, who we've brought up a couple times because again he graduated out of that U22. The most likely candidate after that would probably be Diego Fagundes. Galaxy are paying him about $1 million at the moment. He wasn't a guaranteed starter at the end of last year. Although I'd hate to lose him in that lineup because he offers you so much. I mean, we spoke about it last time we were together, when we were trying to figure out who Greg Vanney was going to start in MLS Cup. I mean, he gives you options in the middle and on the wing, but because he gives you options in the middle and on the wing, I think he is a player that can comfortably step into that starting 11 in a lot of MLS lineups. So, if the Galaxy get a good offer for him, or if the Galaxy know that, hey, we can go ahead and move him and free up funds to go ahead and do something else or bring in this player, if it's dependent on that, I don't think they are going to have that emotional attachment. I think they're going to get business done and let him go. But after Dejan Joveljic, which Ananda mentioned, that's probably the most likely. But hopefully the Galaxy hold on to both of them. If they're going to lose somebody, it's going to be Joveljic just because they can't fit him under that salary cap.
Fair enough. And look, it's the reason why so many teams at any point in the season have had to let go players over time, right? Salary cap rules. I know fans aren't the biggest fan of them, right? But again, it does create some level of parity, and at the end of the day, like we all have to adhere to them. So with that said, there's just so many pieces in there for the Galaxy attacking wise that you can't. Again, that we talked about not replicating Puig. I don't think you can have someone right now that could replicate the goal production that you guys are getting out of Joveljic, but when you think about right who might have to pay the price, right, who might have to get cut along the way, it does kind of make sense. Again, but hopefully, if you guys looking to obviously create as much chaos with the competitions you have coming up, right, to successfully defend your title at the same time, Joveljic will be key to help you guys get that done. So we'll see if that ends up happening or not. But either way, guys, Ananda, Rob, man, thank you both so much for jumping on with me tonight, just talking about how this
Our
business
pleasure.
is going down for the Galaxy. Look, guys, if you tuned in this far in the episode, first off, thank you so much. Do me a favor, down below, we're going to link everything like Una Galaxiana. Rob's Twitter handle, Ananda's Twitter handle, they're on your screen, but at the same time, they'll be down in the description below, along with a link to their YouTube channel. You want to follow everything Galaxy rumors-wise, a lot of activity. I still feel stuff on the table. Go to their channel down below. Go watch, like, subscribe, do all those great things. These guys are super knowledgeable. And more importantly, man, they're just cool as hell. So I appreciate you guys, man, jumping on tonight. Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. And guys, again, if you haven't done so already, man, you're new to the channel, like, subscribe to Goals TV down below. Got plenty of content coming for the upcoming 2025 MLS season. We just had a great box-to-box episode go live with our friend Will over at MLS Moves. A lot of great things coming, guys. Yes, sir. All right, man. I appreciate it, guys. From everybody here at Wake Up MLS, my name is Jose. That's Ananda. That's Rob. We'll catch you guys next time.